Welcome to today's webinar, Protecting Data and Systems from Cyber Threats, the Cybersecurity Landscape in Singapore. Thank you once again for joining us this evening. My name is Ethan, and I'm from the Singapore Global Network, or SGN for short. So for those of you who have not heard about SGN, we are a new division in the Economic Development Board of Singapore. We focus on connecting people and building personal relationships with individuals all over the globe. So if you are someone who is keen to explore working or living in Singapore, if you want to find out more about opportunities here, or if you are an overseas Singaporean thinking about returning, we can get you connected to the right people and resources. So we have a stellar lineup of speakers for this webinar. We are very privileged to have speakers from Kaspersky and the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore with us this evening. So before we start, I'll just quickly like to run through some housekeeping rules. So firstly, for us to have a good experience in this session, we have turned off the video, audio, and screen sharing function for all participants. We would love to hear your questions, and we definitely want to make this session as interactive as possible. So please do use the Q&A function if you have questions for our speakers. You can also upvote questions which you want answered in the session. Lastly, in case you miss any part of this session or wish to view this webinar on demand, we are recording this session and will make it available on YouTube. Okay, this is how we're going to spend our time this evening. I really hope that you enjoy the program that we have lined up for you today. In the first segment, our speakers will be sharing key trends and responses to threats in the cyberspace. They will also talk about how COVID-19 has impacted some of these trends. In our second segment, we have a panel of speakers who will be sharing their perspectives on a few key topics in the cybersecurity ecosystem, including the roles of the private and public sectors and their synergies in the ecosystem, collaborations with the community, and the talent landscape. They will also touch on some of the program's talent and the community. And before we wrap up, we'll have a Q&A function. We'll have a Q&A segment where you can get your questions answered. So please just pop your questions in the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of the panel here. Okay, so for the first segment, we are very happy to have Willis, Deputy Director of the National Cyber Threat Analysis Center, CSA, and Leonard, Head of Pre-Sales for APAC in Kaspersky. So as CSA, Willis performs source analysis of cyber threats and other developments that threaten security in cyberspace. The focus areas include analysis of key trends in cybersecurity, as well as threat and risk assessment models to determine their impact. Our second speaker, Leonard, leads the team of pre-sales managers and engineers across APAC, providing pre-sales support on all Kaspersky solutions to address the cybersecurity needs of customers and partners. He has close to 20 years of experience in sales engineering and is armed with an extensive range of knowledge and experience from multiple security domains across APAC. Okay, so now I'll turn the time over to Willis, who will kick off this webinar. Willis, please.
Thank you very much, Ethan. Let me just start sharing my screen. Okay, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I guess a good afternoon, depending on where you are too. My name is Willis, and I'm from the Threat Analysis Center of the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore. A very big thanks to our friends at the Singapore Global Network for organizing this important and timely event, and in putting together such a learned and diverse lineup of speakers so that we may all benefit and share from the learning. Okay, so for my presentation today, I'd like to share a bit about the work that CSA does, specifically on research into cybersecurity threats. We begin by looking at Singapore's cyber threat landscape and sharing broad observations about the trends over the past year. We then take a closer look at the phenomena of phishing. And finally, as the title of my presentation suggests, I'd like to share some of CSA's findings on the connection between phishing and the global COVID-19 pandemic, which many cybersecurity experts and researchers have pointed out provided very favorable conditions for a range of malicious cyber activities. So some of the observations I'll be sharing are drawn from Singapore Cyber Landscape 2019, which CSA published about 2 months ago. SCL 2019 is the 4th edition of our annual publication on the threat situation. Okay, so enough plugging CSA's products, so let's begin my presentation. To begin, CSA conducts all source analysis to better understand the local cyber landscape as well as other prevalent or emerging trends. So while the array of cyber threats is vast and continues to grow, there are in essence really four main cyber activities that are regularly observed. So these are web defacements, ransomware, command and control or CNC servers, as well as their enslaved botnet drones and phishing. So I'll just spend the next couple of minutes going through some of our observations about each of these categories. The first malicious activity is web defacement. In general, web defacements are opportunistic, indiscriminate, and self-aggrandizing in nature, with hackers trying to exploit websites and servers just to show off their victims, and at the same time show off how good they are at exposing security flaws. Web defacements increased slightly in 2019 over 2018, and can be attributed in part to a surge in hacktivism fueled by the global wave of protests last year. The majority of local defaced websites belong to small and medium enterprises from sectors such as education, finance, manufacturing, and retail. The next malicious activity is ransomware, and we also saw an increase in cases for 2019. There are two key aspects to note for ransomware. So cyber criminals have been observed to be shifting from indiscriminate targeting of victims to enterprise ransomware attacks, or what we call big game hunting, where they target big organizations hoping for a larger payout. The ransomware malware used in such attacks are generally stealthier and sometimes customized specifically to take down the networks of the targeted organizations. The second and more worrisome trend is that cyber criminals are now using the ability of new ransomware malware to exfiltrate, which is to steal data in addition to just encrypting it. This forces organizations to choose between paying the ransom or facing the consequences of having the stolen data leaked. So we have been seeing ransomware groups leak the stolen data on dedicated websites to pressure their victims, and also serve as a warning of sorts to others who don't pay up. So ransomware incidents should now really be regarded as potential data breaches or leaks, which is something that individuals or organizations should take into account when developing incident response plans. So next up, we have botnets and CNC servers. So let me explain a bit about these two unfortunate entities first. There are many types of malware that infect computer devices with the objective of turning them into bots that carry out a variety of tasks. Now, a botnet is simply a number of bots under the control of the same threat actor. This threat actor communicates with his botnet using a command and control server and makes them to make the bots perform automated activities such as mine for cryptocurrency, carry out a denial of service attacks, or use their collective computing power to crack passwords online, for instance. So botnets and CNC servers are one category of malicious cyber activities that have trended down over the last year. However, one of the more prominent botnet malware, called Mirai, continued to grow in tandem with the adoption of Internet of Things devices in Singapore. So since its inception, in 2016, Mirai has evolved to include very complex attack tools, which take advantage of the general weak security that continues to exist in many IoT devices today. So finally, we go on to phishing. Now, phishing continues to be one of the most popular and effective methods of social engineering, where threat actors impersonate trusted organizations and individuals to steal sensitive data from victims. Even before the advent of COVID-19, last year was really a bumper year for phishing. It recorded the highest level of attacks since 2016. Most of the spoof companies included technology firms, banking and technology sector, financial sector organizations, as well as email service providers. So the rise of phishing as a service also likely fueled this increase in phishing attacks, since it provides templates spoofing a range of popular brands and companies, giving cyber criminals an easier head start without the need for any in-depth technical knowledge. Well, there's been a lot written about the technical attributes of phishing. We often need to remind ourselves that phishing is inherently psychological in nature and prey on a range of human emotions. But that's what makes it incredibly effective, because as we all know, there are a number of situations where our heart could conceivably trump our minds. So over the past half year, with the advent of COVID-19 and the disruption of many economic and social activities, we have observed the coronavirus theme being capitalized on in wide-ranging phishing campaigns. So in this slide alone, we can see how the pandemic theme has been nuanced to appeal to 4 different kinds of emotions and sentiments, such as outrage, greed, fear, and curiosity. In many cases, the call to action in phishing emails and messages also directly invoke influences or conditions that appeal to our emotive states. This was particularly salient over the past few months, as the general climate of fear and uncertainty caused by the coronavirus really resulted in an environment that was really conducive for phishing attacks to succeed. Now we're going to zero in on a particular technique that threat actors use for phishing. And domain spoofing takes phishing and amplifies its effectiveness by abusing the reputation of renowned or trusted entities, all for the sole purpose of getting us to click on a malicious link. I'll take, for example, the iBanking homepage of one of our local banks. Similar looking websites are created by switching around the order of words, making intentional spelling mistakes, or inserting additional characters so as to pass the link off as being legit. So similarly, COVID-themed phishing leverages this pandemic-related and related or other relevant keywords to trick unsuspecting victims into clicking on these domains. So on to the final and main section of my presentation. As the pandemic raged globally, CSA researched COVID-19 related phishing trends and how they leveraged or built on the Singapore context. So we wanted to find out 3 things primarily. Does our data confirm a rise in malicious COVID-related phishing domains globally? Did phishing domains move towards context-specific teams? And finally, how were Singapore entities leveraged or abused in COVID-themed phishing? So it's a bit about our methodology. As mentioned earlier, phishing emails often reference events, entities, or legitimate organizations as lures to hook their victims. So it was absolutely crucial that we accurately identify lures and keywords, the accurate lures and keywords to uncover the malicious phishing links. Now, going by the trajectory of global COVID-19 developments, we theorized that there might be general lures, which were really universal and global keywords used throughout the entire span of the pandemic, and team lures that would wax and wane in popularity corresponding to different phases of the coronavirus. So we developed sample keywords for each category. So as we know, for phase 1 of the pandemic, which was roughly from the beginning of this year to about April, the general themes might be most in play, since that was when fear, panic, and interest were at their peak. Sorry. After April, as we moved into lockdown and subsequently recovery, we started to see more targeted lures appearing. And these really capitalized on themes more specifically associated with these periods themselves. So on to our findings. Somewhat unsurprisingly, the months of March to May saw about a near 50% increase in average malicious phishing URLs over the preceding months. Now, several thousands of these phishing links were malicious COVID-19 related links that directly utilized general or team lures that we discussed earlier. Now, there was also a significant surge from March, tracking global interest in COVID-19. This spiked in April as threat actors rolled out ever more pandemic-related phishing domains. Now, this number declined somewhat in May, and there were a number of possible factors, but it was quite likely due to news fatigue and potential victims wising up to the phishing techniques. The level of COVID-19 phishing activity in May still trended well above the months preceding March this year, though. Overall, though, the proportion of COVID-19 related phishing links was rather small compared to the total number of phishing URLs that we observed. As COVID-19 evolved, the pandemic-related phishing URLs also moved from alarmist keywords that directly referenced the pandemic to links that were more commonly associated with work-from-home arrangements, lockdowns, and services. Now, towards April and May, recovery-themed keywords like vaccine and government stimulus packages also started popping up as countries started to reopen and restart their economies. I must caveat, though, that for many of these themed lures and keywords, especially those that we associated with the lockdown phase, were already very popular with cyber criminals to begin with, but even these took on increased salience when combined with the effects of the pandemic. Now, taking a closer look at the themed keywords, these recorded surges from February onwards and kind of peaked in April. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are evergreen organizations such as Netflix or Amazon, for instance, that were already very commonly spoofed. But even these witnessed further spikes from February to May of this year. Unsurprisingly, new favorites like Zoom and other services that were used for work from home and other COVID-19 arrangements also started to emerge. In the Singapore context, we observe an average of several hundreds of Singapore-linked phishing URLs from March to May of 2020. That was about twice the monthly average in the previous 3 months. Likewise, local organizations such as banks and telcos, which were popular lures for cyber criminals to begin with, also saw spikes in spoofing observations in April. However, Singapore-specific lures did not appear as popular as those spoofing global entities, most likely because of the broader-based appeal of the latter category. Other observations include threat actors spoofing local brands that saw increased use and demand during the pandemic, such as e-commerce and food delivery websites. Government domains were also spoofed and used as lures in phishing URLs, given the central role of government agencies in coordinating pandemic response and information dissemination. So interestingly, in many of the phishing links that we observe, threat actors usually combine direct mentions of the pandemic with other themes for added salience. The latter were usually masquerading as tech, payment, or even service providers. In some of these, the phishing messages claim that their membership or subscription services have been affected as a result of the pandemic, and ask potential victims to click on malicious links to update or review their information, or some other reason along these lines. I think what all this shows is how incredibly sensitive cybercriminals are to changes in the environment, and how quickly they can adapt salient issues and other hot button topics for their own malicious purposes. So as I mentioned earlier, the proportion of phishing URLs which capitalize on COVID-19 appeared to be small relative to the overall phishing landscape. However, there are always going to be limitations to sense making. Domain spoofing is just one of the many vectors that threat actors use. For example, cybercriminals could have found instant messaging, email attachments, and even realistic looking web content more effective as threat vectors. Now, shortened URLs and hyperlinks created using apps like Bitly also help to hide and garble the actual malicious link and trick victims into lowering their guard. So really, it is only when we all come together to combine our visibility of the potential threat vectors that our understanding of the subject matter will become much clearer. And that's perhaps an apt way for me to conclude. I think no organization today has a complete picture of the global threat landscape. We all have different pieces of the threat picture, and it's more important for us to share information, observations, and best practices so that we collectively enhance our situational awareness. This even as threat actors continue to evolve and refine their tactics. This slide represents a summary of what I've just shared. Thank you very much for your kind attention. So without further ado, I'm just going to hand over to my colleague Leonard from Kaspersky, who's going to bring us through his presentation. Leonard, please.
Okay, hi. Thanks, Willis. Hope everyone can hear me. Okay, so once again, thank you very much to the Singapore Global Network for inviting us to share. Okay, and good morning, afternoon, and evening to all, depending on where you're joining us from. So my name is Leonard, and I'm from Kaspersky, and I'm here to share with you my topic entitled View from the Trenches. So sounds strange, right? Why view from the trenches? So what I'll be sharing with you is actually what I have picked up in my multiple discussions with my customers, my business partners across the Asia Pacific region. Okay, but first a little bit about myself. So what you can see on the video is Zoom touch up. This is what I looked like a couple of years ago. And why am I showing this? It's not trying to share that being in cybersecurity is going to age you. For me, I guess it's genetics. That's why now I've got much lesser hair than this profile picture, right? So don't be afraid about anything about cybersecurity, right? It's all under control. Okay, so I have been in cybersecurity now for close to 20 years, right? Actually, ever since my first job. And currently, I'm the head of pre-sales for covering the Asia Pacific region for Kaspersky. For those on the call who is maybe not from the IT sector, if you're unaware what does pre-sales do, it actually means I'm part of the sales team that engages with clients to help them solve their cybersecurity issues, right? So, I mean, we'll speak to the clients, what issues do you have, and then we'll propose our solutions so that it can help the customer there. And this role has actually given me plenty of opportunities to engage with clients all over the region, listening to the issues they have, the problems they are facing, and the requirements that they have, right? And in addition to talking to clients, I also work with business partners who represent us to meet their clients and their needs there. Okay, so that's enough about myself. Now on to cybersecurity. Willis has covered, done a great job covering, major trends and threats there. I'm not going to go into that deep, but I just thought I want to share with you some security news that I've captured, over the last 2 weeks actually. Globally, right, you can see there are all sorts of attacks, ranging from ransomware, right? Ransomware, trying to attack using big names like Elon Musk. Another ransomware there, checking out the components industry, yet another ransomware attack, this time by Canon. These are all big names that's all subject to big ransomware attacks over there. On top of ransomware, now there's data breaches as well. New South Wales, 738 gig of customer data stolen. Warner Music Group, customer data stolen, data breach there. The hotel, Ritz London client scammed after an apparent data breach. And this was actually a pretty sophisticated breach where the bad guys managed to go into the reservation system, right? They stole the data of who made reservations. They then made phone calls to these people who made reservations for the restaurants and said, sir, just to confirm your reservation, could you mind giving me your credit card details so that I can confirm your reservation? So these guys, I mean, it's rich, right? So they gave the credit card numbers, details. Thought nothing about it. They went for their dinner. After their dinner, when they checked their credit card statement, online, these bad guys, they actually spent £5,000 worth of on some other shops everywhere there. So that's how they got scammed. This was quite an interesting one. Even a security firm has been hit by a data breach. Shan security training firm has been hit by a data breach. So nobody is left alone. Okay, and on top of that, as what Willis was mentioning, phishing, right? So phishing are targeting Lloyd Bank customers, phishing using bots to land in victims' inboxes as well. So phishing is another major threat that we are seeing over here. So this is global. So what about on Singapore? So I've taken this from our own cybersecurity agency. As Willis mentioned, they launched a Singapore Cyber Landscape 2019 report. This was launched on 26 June, I believe. And so I've taken just to show you some statistics there. Singapore is not spared from what the rest of the world is facing. Right? There's been more than 47,000 phishing URLs with a Singapore link. Of those, governments were commonly spoofed. There were 35 cases of ransomware reported. And just bear in mind, these are reported cases. There's bound to be many, many more who are unreported, either because they do not know how to report, or they're too embarrassed to report, or because they're just, following the attacker's commands, do not report, right? It's like kidnapping, right? Do not report to the police, just pay us the ransom. Some people will just do that. Okay, so this case in Singapore, it is still following the global trend as well. Okay, and in case you haven't noticed, we are in some new times, right? The whole landscape, the world's landscape is changing, right? Our personal lives have changed, business has had to change. Businesses change the way they operate, how they engage customers, right? And also their own staff. Who would have expected, right? Singapore hawker centers, the hawker stalls need to go online in order to do online delivery and all that. Nobody would have expected that if you asked them 1 year ago. You ask a hawker, an old famous hawker 1 year ago, you want to go online, he'll tell you, you're crazy. I'm so busy now doing my things here. Don't get me online. But right now, a lot of them have had no choice. They had to move online. Okay, so that is how business is changing and staff has changed, right? Most of us in Singapore, we are all working from home. I have not stepped foot into the office, I think, for last couple of months. And so everybody's remote. This gives a lot of issues to our IT side. So majority of all these changes that we are forced to make are all reliant on IT. And as a result, the cyber threat landscape is also changing, right? The threat landscape has changed. Organizations need to rethink their whole cybersecurity strategies. In the past, everybody was contained within, the environment. I could protect the perimeters. Right now, everybody's at home. Where's the perimeter? How do I define where is a safe place to log in from, where is not safe? I'm working from home now. My wife is at home with in another company. How do we know whether it's safe what we are doing, and all that? Okay, so this has made a lot of changes to us. But bear in mind, there has been one group of users globally, right, who are no change to them. They have been working remotely ever since day one. And this group are the cyber attackers, the bad guys there. They've all been working remotely. So this is normal to them. And they're taking advantage of this situation here. Okay. So after all my slides, the previous slides about doom and gloom, how bad, how sad everything is going, what actually is this one positive outcome from all of this, right? What's the one positive outcome that I like to share with all of you on this call? Is this. The demand for cybersecurity professionals is increasing more than ever, right? I don't have the statistics for Singapore, right? I don't have that. But when I hear about other countries there, you hear, for example, US, unemployment rate of 15%, but there's still 600 over 1,000 cybersecurity jobs not filled, right? So that's totally against the trend, right? So the demand for cybersecurity professionals is increasing more than ever, okay? So the next few slides of my presentation is actually more to share with you when I talk to clients, what is the kind of setup they have, what kind of security roles and positions are available, for if you want to consider a job inside the cybersecurity space. So just to share with you what I've seen. Okay, so this is a case study based on a fictional organization, let's call it XYZ organization. And what I've listed there are all the various types of cybersecurity related roles that they have, right? Of course, this is all dependent on the size of the organization. If it's a smaller organization, there may not be that many. If it's larger, of course, there'll be multiple people in each of these roles as well. Okay, so this is what we have. So starting from the top, right, we have our Chief Information Security Officer. So he sets the direction of what needs to be done with cybersecurity. He would likely report to the board or report to the CEO. In other organizations, they report to the CIO, but he's the one who sets the direction of what needs to be done for cybersecurity. And he may directly manage some of the other folks in security, or he may not, really depending on how the organization is set up. Then next, there's a GRC officer, a governance risk compliance officer. So this GRC officer, he's responsible to making sure that the organization follows whatever guidelines or regulations it needs to comply with, right? So if it's in the financial sector, they need to comply with certain MAS regulations. So the GRC officer will be there to ensure that compliance to this, as well as he will also be there to measure the risk. So he could be from the risk aspect, right? And then make necessary decisions in order to complete to come up with the proper security strategy, right? In some organizations, this is entire risk team, right? So when I speak to certain banks, right, sometimes it's pretty strange. I can talk to one organization inside a bank, telling them about my solutions and everything, and I thought I did a great job. Then a few weeks later, I have another request to meet with another person in this organization, but now from the risk team, who totally does not know anything what I spoke to the other side. So I need to repeat myself, but it is good because at least they're cross-checking each other, that they know, what's going on as well. Okay. Next up, we have got security administrators. They handle the day-to-day administration operations of the security-related infrastructure, firewalls, SIEM systems, IDS. They could be managing anything security-related over there. Okay. After that, we could have incident responders, malware analysts, digital forensics folks. So these are the guys who, if there's any incident or any issue, they'll get called in, right? Like the emergency team, like the firefighters, they'll come in to try to contain the incident and then respond to it appropriately there. When we are talking about malware analysts, these are the guys who will go in, identify, okay, so there's this unknown object is doing something funny. I will now analyze this file, reverse engineer this code, this piece of code, to identify what actually is happening, who is it linked to, what else does it do, and so forth. Forensics, it will now pick up all the different traces to find out how this piece got in, what actually happened, and tell the whole story of what happened there. Okay. Another role that we are seeing, especially nowadays more and more, are threat intelligence analysts. So they will be the like in a like in a military organization, there's military intelligence where they will gather all the information about the enemy and all that. Same thing for cyber threats. There's threat intelligence analysts. They will figure out the intelligence over what are the bad stuff happening out there. They will listen in. They will see, okay, there's this bad guys. They're trying to target a similar organization to mine. This is how they do it. I will now share this information out to the security team so that they can make sure that the organization's security defenses are all in place. These are also the guys where if let's say there's an incident, the incident response team can lean on them. Hey, I've seen this, who will make use of this, find out all the nitty-gritty stuff to find out more information. So that's a threat intelligence analyst team there. Okay, there's the SOC analyst. So SOC analyst and security administrators sometimes are related. Sometimes if you're big enough, it could be a totally separate role. Where this SOC analyst, the whole team here, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, what they do is they literally monitor the security systems, monitor the events that have come in, analyze the events, and then if necessary, if it's confirmed that it could be an incident, then they trigger the incident responders. So it could also be part of the incident response team there. Okay, and finally on this list, but definitely not exhaustive. I mean, there could be still a lot of other roles, but last on my list that I have are security developers. So there are a lot of security developers who come in two flavors. One could be part of the security team where they are writing all kinds of scripts to help enable the security team to do better. And another aspect is there's a lot of developers out there right now. I mean, we're all moving to digital, right? I was listening to a podcast a few months ago where DBS was on the podcast. They were talking and they're saying because of COVID-19, this remote banking, they've increased their release cycle for apps, that they are releasing apps on such a fast basis just in order to deal with the new normal. So if these developers are paired together with someone who's security minded, when they develop the code in the first place, it will be secure. So these are the type of security developers that I'm talking about over here. Okay, so these are type of the roles that we have. My next slide is what kind of skills are needed to be in the security industry. So as corny as this sounds, as Steve Jobs said in 2008, stay hungry, stay foolish. In cybersecurity, things are constantly changing and evolving. So you always need to be curious to try different ways and methods to look at the issues. Okay, so an example I can give is, I think last year, there was this big case involving a Taiwanese manufacturer where they got impacted by something strange. One of our analysts got involved in this investigation. He tried for a couple of weeks, could not break it, did not understand what went wrong, tried to get this malware to run. He had a copy of the malware, couldn't run. He tried everything, could not run for a couple of weeks. Finally, for whatever reason, nobody would have thought about it. He decided to match the serial number or the unique ID of the hard disk to match whatever was found in that company. Once he changed this, the malware ran. And from there, he could break into the malware to determine what is wrong. So it's just being curious, staying foolish, just trying everything and not giving up. That is what other skills are absolutely needed in cybersecurity there. Okay, but on a more practical note, here are a list of skills that are useful to have. Okay, computing. This is cybersecurity. Definitely, you need to know your knowledge on computing devices. Depending on the type of role, you may need to go deep into system architecture, operating systems, so that you will know, if some code is trying to move a piece of data or send some instruction into non-typical place in memory, you know that something is wrong there. So you need to go down to that level if you're looking into malware analysis, for example. Networking. So unless the attackers in your office or your home or can physically pass you a USB storage device or a thumb drive, the attacker will most probably be attacking you via a network or the internet. So you need to know how do networks operate, right? TCP/IP stacks, how do they communicate each other, what is normal. In this case, you can be able to identify any abnormal behavior across the network over there, which is trying to maybe exploit some vulnerabilities or trying to take advantage of some loopholes and just to gain access to the network there. Okay, again, coding knowledge, like what I mentioned earlier, is definitely useful if you're planning to become a malware analyst. You need to know how to reverse engineer a file. So I have seen one of my analysts on the spot in a customer, he just took a file, he opened up in some, I I don't even know the name. The name was, I think, IDA Pro or something. It was a debugging tool. It opened up, came up all the funny machine code, and he could understand every single bit of what was going on. He could say, yeah, this is where the bad guys launched the attack from here, from here, from here. I was looking, I said, I don't know what's going on. But still, definitely you need to have coding knowledge there. Of course, cybersecurity, anything security related. You know about malwares, firewalls, VPNs, anything of this is going to be useful. And finally, which is a piece that a lot of times is overlooked, soft skills. You need to be able to write and communicate. You may be the smartest person around, you can identify what is the issue, but if you cannot communicate these findings, the value of what you found is greatly reduced because people just don't understand, okay? So these are just some of the suggestions that I have based on my experiences, and I thought it would just be good to share with you in case you're interested to join me in the cybersecurity industry. Okay, and with that, thank you very much for listening, and I think I'll hand it back over to Ethan.
Thank you for the very insightful sharing, Willis and Leonard. So for those of you in the audience who have questions for Willis and Leonard, please do make use of the Q&A function, and we will get your questions answered in the last segment of this webinar. So for the next segment, we have very distinguished speakers on the panel which will share about the cybersecurity ecosystem in Singapore. We are very happy to have Genie, Head of Public Affairs for APAC in Kaspersky, moderate this session. So many of you will be familiar with Genie. She's a seasoned professional in international government relations, a lawyer called to the Singapore Bar, negotiator, public speaker, thought leader, and community influencer. So without further ado, I'll hand the time over to you, Genie.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, Ethan. Hi, everyone can hear me clearly, yeah? I'm Genie. With me on the panel, we have Mr. Selwyn Scharnhorst, Director for Ecosystem Development in Cybersecurity Agency. And from Kaspersky, I'm joined by my dear colleagues, Anastasia, who's Director for HR Asia Pacific, and Shan, who looks after academic partnerships in Asia Pacific. Just some quick housekeeping, really. We don't have very much time together, only just about 20 minutes. So feel free, please, to quickly ask any questions during this time. And you can type your questions into the questions pane and click send, and we'll try and get to them as much as we can. It'd be helpful if you can also indicate who the question is posed to, and yeah, so we can direct them appropriately. And for those who've got burning questions you'd like to ask verbally, you may request to do so by requesting to be unmuted. And then, of course, I think I'll leave it to Ethan to do the necessary. Yeah. So just to start off this session, I think maybe I want to ask Selwyn the very first question. Maybe, Selwyn, you can give us a broad overview. You know, what is the cybersecurity talent landscape in Singapore like? And what is the outlook for the demand of cybersecurity talents in Singapore?
Thanks very much, Genie. It's often, you can often find cybersecurity jobs listed among the top 5 most sought after technology job roles. It's been that way for some time. And that's also the reason why the cybersecurity workforce in Singapore has actually been grown over the years at quite a rapid rate. It's actually 2.5 times what it was about 4 years ago. So when we have some statistics that give us a sense of the growth, and between 2014 and 2018, the workforce actually grew to become 2.5 times what it was. And that speaks about the sheer growth of the industry. It reflects the underlying digitalization that's going on in many parts of our economy. And even though there is a downturn, the industry still is growing because of the sheer pace of digitalization. I would say that the growth rates of the industry have been averaging about 10% over the last few years. And we still see active hiring by both private sector organizations and public sector organizations. And these employers range from those in the Big Four to cybersecurity consultancies. They range from employers in the finance sector, the government, as well as ICT and telecoms employers as well. And so we see this pace continuing to go. There's definitely demand for cybersecurity, and there are a range of interventions that both employers as well as the government have been putting in place to try and get more people into cybersecurity, get their skills up to the mark that's required, and be able to help make a difference against all the cyber threats that exist out there.
Right. Thanks, Alvin. I sort of just want to hear from Anastasia along these lines. Basically, because Anastasia is in charge of, attracting talents and also responsible for helping to recruit. What is your general observation of our cybersecurity talent landscape from a private sector point of view?
Thank you, Genie. Thank you, Salvin. Let me address it from another perspective. About 5 years ago, when I would come to a networking session with my peer HR colleagues from other companies, and when I would answer the question, okay, I'm from cybersecurity industry, the most common reply would be, okay, now everyone knows. Everyone knows. So what it means? It means that it's not just growing. What pandemic did to us, it didn't bring awareness to everyone, to all of the industries that previously probably didn't pay a lot of attention to these topics, or would think that, okay, we just buy software from a vendor and we would be fine. Now everyone understands that it's not enough, and that in addition to vendors, in addition to professional expertise that is available within the industry of cybersecurity, they need to have the expertise in-house, who would basically talk the same language, who would understand what configuration to buy, what would be the infrastructure, whether it's compatible, whether it's not, and basically help the organization to chart the right course in the midst of what's going on. So what we actually see is not just the increased demand. We see that it's blending into the industries that it was not present before.
Okay, thanks for that perspective, Anastasia. So switching a little bit of a gear, because we started off this part of the discussion talking about demand. So we do have one question from one of the attendees, which is asking, what are some of the programs that CSA has introduced to increase the supply of cybersecurity talents in Singapore? I suppose I'll have to tap on one of my CSA colleagues to help me with that. Salvin, maybe?
Yeah, thanks, Jeannie. I'm happy to take that question. There are a variety of programs that have been we've done over the years, and we do this together with a lot of our colleagues from other government agencies as well. We have programs designed all the way from trying to bring more students into cybersecurity. So we now start a process by which we encourage secondary school students to go for cybersecurity boot camps to take part in capture the flag competitions. And that's a way for us to be able to interest students and start to build a pipeline of interested people and future professionals from a much earlier age. That's really from at the youth level. And then I think there are more spaces now in universities, growing number of spaces in both computer science and cybersecurity degrees to be able to, again, have more people enter the cybersecurity workforce. We've increased the number of scholarships that are made available at the polytechnic levels, the university level. There are more PhD scholarships as well to make sure that we have that representation of the workforce, even in the innovation and the research part of it. For professionals, those who have recently graduated and those that are going into the workforce, there are a variety of programs that can help on both the private sector side and the government side. For the private sector side, there are schemes to be able to help encourage and subsidize people to convert into cybersecurity. Oftentimes, the people who convert into cybersecurity tend to have a bit of a STEM background, or they have had a strong interest in their own personal lives in ICT. And so we subsidize companies to be able to train more of such people, to be able to convert more of such people who may have been trained in other places to go into cybersecurity. That's for the private sector side. For the public sector side, we do also a variety of things, but one of the things that we do emphasize is recruitment. So for CSA, what we do internally is that we have something called a cybersecurity development program. It's an 18-month process. The first 3 months involves training the new graduates and some mid-career entrants rigorously for 3 months. Then after that, for the rest of it, we give them an attachment within our organization. And we give them a chance to be able to, through that training, be able to get a modular master's at one of our local universities. And that builds towards a Masters of Science in Security by Design, for example. But we don't just stop there. We want to make sure that our workforce is actually quite representative of the people that we want to serve. So that's why we do go out to try and interest more girls and more women to join in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is sometimes often thought of as like a lone wolf profession. You wear the hoodie, you're in the dark. You know, that's not really the case nowadays. Even on the dark side, they work together in teams, right? And definitely on the side of the good guys and the good girls, I mean, we have to work together in the teams. We need to be able to communicate. We've got to be able to, help people work together to be able to crack problems. And so working together in teams is very important. And we've got to be reflective of the people that we serve.
Thanks for that, Selwyn, because I'm just going to pick up on one of the points that you mentioned, along the lines of upstream supply chain. So you talked about reaching out to students, also getting them interested in all that. And I think there's a lot of value in doing that. Shan, who's on the panel, my colleague from Kaspersky, handles academic partnerships. And I think in your course of your work, Shan, you would have experience in getting students interested in cybersecurity. Maybe you have some points to share along those lines?
Sure. As a member of this ecosystem, we are not too far off from what the government agencies like CSA is doing. In fact, CSA's programs are quite far-reaching and has a good variety and depth for different types of students, whether it's downstream or upstream. But for me personally, as a company, as a private company in the ecosystem, I do see some things that students are more interested in as opposed to other things. For example, what have we done? They are always happy to come on study trips, not just our company locally, but visiting our headquarters and seeing the Malware Reverse Engineering Center at work. You know, how we monitor threats round the clock. So these are experiences that students want and would love to go on year after year. So that is one. Another thing I find students being engaged in would be mentoring. Some of our colleagues like Leonard, they are mentors, you know, for local university students. So as far as students, so long as they are interested to find out more about cybersecurity, you know, they can come talk to us, etc. We would be happy to support them. But the obstacle I feel in the current landscape, it's really not about lack of programs. In fact, the government agency, private companies in the ecosystem have plenty of programs. But IT students in general, they seem to have the sentiment that cybersecurity is very niche, very specialized. At that level where they are in their year ones, even right up to year 3, they are not so sure if they want to specialize so early. So again, I'm not sure if what we can do to work with the schools, maybe to help with the perception building of cybersecurity being too niche or too specialized, and students don't want to explore it first. So I think that's that little bump there. But other than that, I think the programs are really sufficient for the very interested students who are aware and enjoy cybersecurity at the get-go. There is no lack of programs for them.
I think maybe if I may just add, perhaps the hesitance in wanting to specialize at a very early stage of the degree or the course of study could possibly be because they are afraid of stepping into the unknown. So hopefully conversations like what we're having today, where we have people from a broader spectrum of society and the community joining in, getting to know a little bit more about the cybersecurity industry, can then, pick up a little bit of courage and to give it a go and as well. Yeah. And on that note, actually, I have been told by the organizers that there are some attendees amongst us who are people who are based overseas currently and might be interested to know a little bit more of the cybersecurity markets and job opportunities. Going to call on Selwyn to maybe share a little bit more of what are the avenues for Singaporean cybersecurity professionals who are based overseas to find out about these job opportunities.
Thanks, Genie. I think there are really quite a lot of ways to be able to do so, and probably a lot of the easiest ways are actually online. LinkedIn is clearly a platform that many people use, and that's one of the common ways to be able to search for and find out about jobs. There are also some other job portals in Singapore that tend to be a little bit comprehensive, and quite a lot of people post their jobs there. mycareersfuture.gov.sg is one where a lot of companies have been quite deliberate to try and make sure that during this downturn, they try to post their job openings on those portals as well. If for some reason you are more inclined towards public service, there's a dedicated public service one at careers.gov.sg as well. But I would also say that one of the best ways to actually get a feel of the industry is actually to be able to get to know other people in the industry. And that involves, for example, it's often good to go and reach out and connect with people in the different cybersecurity related associations in Singapore, right? As well as the interest groups. I think that is a really nice way to be able to get to know other people. And what I've been struck by about the cybersecurity industry is just how passionate people are about cybersecurity. And if you express a willingness to be able to learn, or you want to get a sense of how you're able to get on that journey to becoming a cybersecurity professional, there are a lot of people who are going to be helpful. And there are a variety of associations out there. There's, for example, the Association of Infocom Security Professionals, AISP. There's a cybersecurity chapter in the Singapore Computer Society. There are also very strong interest groups in cybersecurity like DivZero, for example. So these are all ways to be able to connect with people. And many of them have webinars online, or they have sessions and events online. These are fantastic ways to go about connecting with people. And then, as hopefully the COVID situation winds down, or, connect with people safely in person, I think these are ways that you can then be able to plug in, get a sense of what are the kinds of jobs that you're interested in. And there's just a multitude of interesting projects and things that are being done nowadays. We look at cybersecurity as an essential part of, for example, autonomous vehicles. How do we secure autonomous vehicles? Right? So it's not always in IT per se, right, that these jobs are, or that you may want to connect with people, to understand more about cybersecurity. There are cybersecurity opportunities in many sectors as well.
Thanks for that. Thanks for that. I am going to pose this next question to Anastasia. And actually, this is a question from the floor by Kay Yen Tiong. What are the skills that you find most fresh graduates lack when entering the workforce? And I suppose this is such a broadly applicable question. It doesn't just apply to cybersecurity. So I think I would want to tap on your experience on hiring not just cybersecurity professionals, but people in the company who are not cybersecurity professionals. What are some of the general skills you think they lack? Yeah, or qualities. Yeah.
Thank you, Genie. I was expecting this question. Penalty. Of course, it's never one size fits all, right? What I would like to comment in general from my experience as an in-house HR involved in hiring, from my experience as a coach, from my experience as a mentor, doing mentoring for Singaporean students as well. It's not actually skill sets. It's about it's about being assertive, and it's about being courageous to be curious, to ask questions. Yeah. I understand that for fresh graduate, it can be a bit awkward. It can be a bit scary when a person comes for an interview, big corporate, you know, cozy meeting room, people around, wearing suits, asking questions. You don't really know how to behave yourself, and you might get stuck. Just don't forget that it's a dialogue. They're asking questions, but it's also a floor for you to ask questions. Yeah, it's also a floor for you to show not just what you learned and not just what you know, but also your passion and your interest and your motivation to learn. And it's okay to say that you don't know something. It's fine as long as you're passionate. You're willing to know that, you're willing to learn, and you have the ability to consider the same issue from different points of view, really asking questions. Okay, have we seen this before? Is it really what it looks like, or is it something different still? You know, as long as you have this ability and you can demonstrate it, you will get a job, believe me.
Thanks for that. Very encouraging, actually. For somebody who's joined the company about 5 months and a half. Anyway, so I'm going to pose the next question to Willis and maybe Leonard to just weigh in, sort of a practitioner's perspective. So this is a question that was submitted during registration, and I feel that we should have it answered. When there are no breaches to handle, actually, I doubt it, right? But because there always will be. Okay, but never mind. Hypothetically, when there are no breaches to handle, what do you usually spend your days working on? And when there are breaches, is it a very high stress environment where you lose hair like Leonard? Maybe Willis can take that question, and Leonard can add on and defend himself.
Thank you, Genie. I think I'm going to borrow Leonard's analogy here about firemen and putting out firefighting. I think so. The question really is, what do firemen? A comparable question would be, what would firemen do in their spare time when they're not fighting fires, right? So, like firemen, cybersecurity practitioners or professionals would generally train how to put out fires. In this case, deal with cyber intrusions and breaches faster and more effectively. So, to share a little, my department, the Threat Analysis Center, is one of the 3 centers under CSA's National Cybersecurity Command. There are 2 more centers, the Incident Response Center and the Threat Monitoring Center. So all 3 of us, all 3 centers work around the clock very closely and with our partners in the private and public sector to respond to cyber threats and in general to have greater situational awareness of what's going on in cyberspace. We also conduct research and analysis into the latest trends and the techniques used by cyber criminals, so we can be prepared to deal with the next incident or even prevent them from even occurring. And of course, we would share our information and work with our local international partners, because cybersecurity really is a team sport, and cooperation is the best way of dealing with ever-evolving cyber threats.
Okay, so just to weigh in, right? So when there's no breaches, usually the time spent, dyeing my hair black and all that. But as you can see, it's very white, so I haven't had much time. Okay, no, but on a more serious note, right? I mean, coming from speaking to organizations, commercial organizations, right? Yes, it's true. They're not going to. I mean, when a breach occurs, yes, that's where all hands on deck. They really get together to try to fix things. That could really be quite a stressful time, because time is definitely of an essence. A lot of times, depending on the organization, if there's a breach, you're given a certain amount of time before you need to report to the correct authorities. You need to do disclosures and all that, and you need to make sure that you disclose the correct things. So there is pressure when there is a breach or whatever. I wouldn't say there isn't there. So again, like what Willis was saying, when there's no breach, what do people do? They spend their time training up in order to be better prepared to handle these breaches, right? So they do training. They will reach out to vendors like Kaspersky. What training do you have? What information can we share with them? They will look for other solutions. How best can they beef up their defenses? From threat intelligence teams, however, they will learn what is happening out there, what's the latest trends, and they will start to discuss this with the wider organization over what do they need to put in place in order to beef up the defenses to get all ready and prepared, in case there's the next breach, and they can handle it much better there. Yeah, so that's what I can share. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, actually, I think my time is up. On the dot 9 p.m., I'm going to hand this time back to Ethan.
Great. A heartfelt thank you to all our speakers, Willis, Leonard, Selwyn, Anastasia, Shan, and our fantastic moderator, Genie. Thank you everyone who has tuned in, and we appreciate you being here. I hope that this webinar has been very useful and insightful for you. We have some very useful resources and links for you here. Let me share my screen. Yeah. So for those of you who are keen to find out more about career opportunities in CSA, do visit the link here, or you can scan the QR code. And if you're a fresh graduate or mid-career looking to explore opportunities in cybersecurity, CSA and IVDA have a great initiative that provides traineeship and upskilling programs. So trainees will have the opportunity to undergo OJT and local and overseas attachment. So if you're keen, you can visit the link or scan the QR code here. Yeah, I would also like to do a shout out here. Kaspersky's Security Analyst Summit 2020 will be going online from the 6th to 8th of October 2020. So if you are really interested and wish to register for CES at home, please do scan the QR code here. We have come to the end of this webinar, and I hope that you have enjoyed this session as much as I did. If you are interested to hear more about exciting developments in the tech scene, latest happenings in Singapore, and upcoming SGN events, do sign up with us. So thank you once again for joining us this evening, and I'll see you in the next event. Take care, everyone.